And I think it's pitiful that the media is constantly asking questions like this of President Trump.
Donald Trump's latest unnecessary and disastrous scandal involving controversial MAGA influencer Laura Loomer is now at the point where a fed-up Fox News host is grilling a visibly flustered Trump campaign spokesperson, and it is glorious. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several things to talk about in this video. It's another follow-up to the ongoing and ever-escalating MAGA civil war for Donald Trump's soul, led primarily by Marjorie Taylor Greene, against Laura Loomer. And these are two awful people, bigoted people, controversial people who regularly say unhinged things about certainly Democrats, liberals, and progressives, but also their fellow Republicans. But Laura Loomer is so controversial, so despicable, that even Marjorie Taylor Greene, by comparison, comes off kinda less bad. I hesitate to say that because she's pretty awful. But yeah, it's getting worse, and we're going to go into all the details. But let's start with the juiciest stuff first. I don't want to make you wait for it. I want you to see this 4+ minute clip of a Fox News host grilling a very flustered, very outraged Trump campaign spokesperson by the name of Karoline Leavitt, who does not like the fact that Fox is asking her these perfectly fair questions about her boss's stupidity. So we're going to play the clip and unpack it together.
Social media feeds have been inundated with remixes of his comments about, this fringe claim that Haitian immigrants are eating pets in Ohio. That was evidently brought to his attention by this figure, Laura Loomer, who has promoted this theory. He's been hanging around with her. How close is Trump to Laura Loomer, and why is he bringing her around with him?
Well, as President Trump said yesterday, this individual does not work for the campaign. She's simply a supporter of the president, and he doesn't agree with everything she said. He doesn't agree with everything that all of his supporters said. He is building a big tent movement, being supported by people like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. And while they don't all agree on everything, they agree on the most important thing, and that is ensuring Kamala Harris cannot be elected as president of the United States, considering she is a radical liberal. And I'm glad you brought up healthcare, Jackie, because I'd love your audience to know where Kamala Harris stands on that issue.
So let's start for just a second. Again, there's a long clip, so there's a lot to unpack, but it is true that Donald Trump finally issued a pretty tepid statement on Truth Central that seemed to put some distance between himself and Laura Loomer, though nowhere near as much as there should be. But this is what Karoline Leavitt is hanging her hopes on. Laura Loomer doesn't work for the campaign. She's a private citizen and longtime supporter. I disagree with the statement she made, but like the many millions of people who support me, she's tired of watching the radical left Marxists and fascists violently attack and smear me, even to the point of doing anything to stop their political opponent, me. I'm now in California, which Democrats like Comrade Kamala Harris and Governor Gavin Newsom have completely destroyed. I will turn it around and make America great again. Days after Laura Loomer made a public, despicable, racist screed against Vice President Kamala Harris, Karoline Leavitt thinks that disavowal from Trump, and I think it's too generous to even call it that, is as timely and as vociferous as it needs to be when the rest of us know it is woefully inadequate.
She supports a socialist takeover of our healthcare system, supporting Bernie Sanders' socialist Medicare for all, which would cost taxpayers $32 trillion. Kamala Harris also wants to give amnesty to the nearly 20 million illegal people that she's allowed into this country, which will absolutely devastate and crumble our healthcare system. And she wants to make taxpayers fund transgender surgeries for illegal immigrants. Those are radical positions. She does not deserve to be elected president of the United States.
So again, Karoline Leavitt's doing her best to derail the conversation and to try to bring up tired talking points from 5 years ago. I wish Vice President Kamala Harris enthusiastically supported Medicare for all, because as far as I'm concerned, somebody who had to watch his mother pass away from cancer, I do believe that in the richest nation on earth, that government subsidized health care is something that should exist. I think it should be the law of the land, because I do believe healthcare is a human right. However, the vice president is all too aware that with the current composition of government and the fact that you have a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court and that the Republicans will fight this every step of the way, that Medicare for all is not politically feasible. It's just not. I wish it were, but it's not. And so over the course of 4 years of governance, going from being a presidential candidate and legislator in the U.S. Senate to a member of the executive branch, the second highest ranking official, well, she has moderated her views on healthcare because she recognizes that what she would ideally like to accomplish is simply not possible. So instead, she wants to expand the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, increase coverage for American citizens, cap insulin at $35, which the Biden-Harris administration accomplished, that even though Trump promised he'd get it done, Biden and Harris got it done. Allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices, again, something else that Trump promised he'd do and failed to get done. But that's how she's tackling the issue of healthcare in these polarized times and in divided government. I should also point out that Donald Trump has repeatedly attempted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, even during the pandemic, as tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people died. So anyway, back to this.
The American people will make that clear on November 5th.
We did hear the former president try to distance himself from Laura Loomer, but he didn't denounce any specific statements that she's made. She once called 9/11 an inside job. He brought her to a 9/11 remembrance ceremony. She said that if Harris wins the election, the White House will smell like curry. That's a racist joke about Harris's Indian heritage. J.D. Vance's wife is Indian. I mean, does he denounce those statements specifically?
President Trump denounced those statements yesterday when he said he does not agree with all of the comments that this individual has made. President Trump went to the 9/11 ceremony to honor those lives that have been that were taken from us on that fateful day, to honor their families. He showed up to a fire station in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and was greeted with enormous applause, by the way, by the family members of those firefighters who were lost on 9/11, while Kamala Harris was not given the same reception. And so again, Americans understand where President Trump stands on the issues. They know that he is the best candidate in this election. And I think it's pitiful that the media is constantly asking questions like this of President Trump, but not asking Kamala Harris if she agrees with all the statements made by her supporters, like maybe Vladimir Putin, who recently endorsed Kamala Harris for president. Does she agree with him? Does Kamala Harris agree with her own running mate, Tim Walz, putting tampons in women's bathrooms in public schools? She needs to be asked those questions as well if President Trump is going to be held to this ridiculous standard.
So before Jacqui Heinrich of Fox News responds, again, the whining, the petulance, the total, and I mean, the visible frustration on her face. How dare you ask tough questions? Well, because that's what the media should do. And by the way, this false equivalence, well, Vladimir Putin endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. You would have a point, Karoline Leavitt, if Vice President Kamala Harris didn't publicly condemn Vladimir Putin on a regular basis, which she does, if she weren't helping President Biden arm Ukraine to resist Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against Russia, which she is helping decimate Vladimir Putin's army. And if she were seen gallivanting around on Air Force Two with Vladimir Putin, then you'd have a point. If she didn't do all those things and was seen flying around with Putin the way that Trump is flying around with Laura Loomer, then there would be an equivalence there which would merit the kinds of questions you're asking. But of course, Karoline Leavitt, much like her boss, much like most members of the Trump campaign, are too dishonest to recognize the facts as they are, and they're doing everything to create a false equivalence here. Of course, Governor Tim Walz did not put tampons in public restrooms. He, signed legislation into law which increased the accessibility of feminine napkins and tampons and things like that in public schools. But again, this is the sort of dishonest talking point that's to be expected of a Trump campaign spokesperson, anything to deflect from the fact that for the umpteenth time, for the countless time, Donald Trump eagerly courts the support and rewards the support of wildly despicable figures like Laura Loomer.
Well, if it's a ridiculous standard, I mean, there are members of the Republican Party who have voiced a lot of concern about her presence on the president's campaign. From Republican Senators Lindsey Graham, Tom Tillis, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, should we expect then, given what you just told me, that we won't be seeing any more of Laura Loomer on the campaign trail with President Trump?
Look, as I said repeatedly now, President Trump does not agree with all of the statements that were made by this individual. President Trump has been building the most diverse political movement that this country has ever seen. He has unified the Republican Party. And the great thing about Republicans, Jacqui, is that we can share when we disagree with one another, but we still understand the bigger picture and that we cannot afford to have Kamala Harris be president of the United States. Unlike the Democrats who try to censor and silence anyone who disagrees with them, as evidenced by big tech censorship of President Trump, and also as evidenced by their lawsuits against RFK Jr. to try to keep him off of the ballot, and their attempts to keep President Trump off of the ballot by waging political lawfare against him. So while we don't agree with everything that everyone says all of the time, we understand that we have a country to save, and Kamala Harris is a dangerous liberal, and she should not be president of the United States.
Is that a no? That Laura Loomer won't be traveling?
I will leave it to President Trump, but as I have...
Yeah, so pretty pathetic effort by Karoline Leavitt. So a couple of things. Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to weaponize the Justice Department and the levers of federal power against his political opponents. He threatened to do it in 2016 when he was a candidate. He threatened to do it in 2020 when he was both the candidate and the sitting president of the United States. He's threatened to do it again in 2024 should he become president again. Threatened much more overtly and much more explicitly than anything he has received. Number two, the Justice Department under Merrick Garland has actually treated Donald Trump, quite frankly, with kid gloves. They worked behind the scenes for more than a year to try to avoid prosecuting Donald Trump by begging him to return national defense information and classified documents, which he unlawfully held. They bent over backwards to try to avoid prosecuting him. Unfortunately, for Karoline Leavitt's boss, Trump is too stupid and criminal to do anything other than what he did, which is why he was ultimately prosecuted. Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to sue members of the press that report critical things about him. He wanted to open up libel and slander laws in order to make it easier to sue the parts of the media that he finds too critical. He has threatened to use the government, the power of the government, should he win again, to crack down on MSNBC and other critical media. He's done that. President Biden hasn't done that to Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, the Daily Wire, or any conservative media outlet. Donald Trump, when he was president in 2020, used his power as president to pressure Twitter to try to delete tweets from celebrities who insulted Donald Trump. Joe Biden has never done that. So yeah, basically with Karoline Leavitt and the Trump campaign, it's all projection. Every accusation is indeed a confession. As a matter of fact, when it comes to stifling dissent, Donald Trump is notoriously thin-skinned, does not brook any dissent. Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who voted with Donald Trump more than 90% of the time when he was president, were formally censured by the Republican Party for being seen as insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump. Donald Trump routinely insults and belittles anybody within the Republican Party and has threatened them for their perceived disloyalty. So no, there is no basis to the idea that Donald Trump tolerates good faith disagreements, criticisms, or anything of the sort. He's an unprincipled, malignant narcissist and authoritarian who brooks no dissent whatsoever. And anyone who pretends otherwise is an unprincipled loser, much like Karoline Leavitt herself. So yeah, this whole thing really isn't cutting it. Again, even Fox is like, this is ridiculous. Republicans from Marjorie Taylor Greene, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and others have come out of the woodwork begging Trump to not just somewhat put distance between himself and Laura Loomer, but to condemn her in no uncertain terms and completely cut himself off from her. And he has not done that. That weak, anemic disavow. Oh, I disagree with some of the things she does. I don't agree with everything she says, but she's so great because she supports me in all these ways. Pretty pathetic stuff. And watching Karoline Leavitt visibly unravel, they're so flustered for having to answer for her boss's personal choices that he has had every opportunity to avoid making and to repent from. That's just, it's delicious to watch it in real time. I love to see it. And the fact that it's Fox News of all places grilling her, you know that's going to trigger Donald Trump. So be on the lookout for a Truth Social rant about Fox. And in the meantime, you let me know what you think in the comments.